Welcome to Superstitions and Traditions. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Trish.
This is our podcast about history, traditions, lots of shenanigans happen through the years. And I like to find that stuff and tell everybody about it.
Because I think everyone should be informed.
Yes.
The more you know.
The more you know. What are we? Is that our 90s?
Got it back. Yes. We've got. Did you see the little star go across?
I did. Okay, February is Black History Month.
Yes, it is.
And today we are going to talk about music.
I love music, and there's such a rich tradition of music.
There is
in the black culture,
especially in American music.
Yes,
all of the music that was formed here in the U.S. was influenced by Afro-American.
Oh, really?
Music. Yes,
I did not know that.
Yes, there was a lot of European music already before the transatlantic slave trade, but the enslaved people, in order to hold on to their culture and to strengthen themselves and hold on to their memories and who they are as people and their culture, used the music they brought with them to do that.
To try to give them a voice, and also I would have not only to keep traditions alive, but a way to heal and to manage.
Yes, to heal and to manage, and despite the horrors they were facing, to keep some hope alive. And that is how we ended up years down the road with jazz music and R&B and the blues and hip hop.
Those are just great genres of music.
I know.
I know my little foot's just tapping down there right now. Just thinking. Yes.
I personally am a big fan of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I like
some jazz.
R&B.
Mm-hmm.
I like music. All forms of music, but jazz and R&B are probably some of my most favorite.
Oh, and I love the blues.
I like the blues too.
Mm-hmm.
So the Afro-American folk music traditions was music that had been passed down through generations. It wasn't written. It had a distinct, repetitive style, and a lot of the songs were spontaneous. Thank you.
I can help you.
Spontaneous. And were thought up on the fly while they were in the fields to kind of keep pace. It encouraged enslaved people that were working slower to kind of keep up a pace. To keep abusers at bay.
Right.
It was also used to signal and was used extensively throughout the Underground Railroad.
Oh, that is it. Yes.
To do it was called a call and repeat style. So someone would sing something and then the others would sing it.
The response
and sometimes would repeat it, but it's how they would know where to go and
if it was a safe place.
Yes.
So if you didn't get the response, then you knew.
Right. And you also, listening to the words, knew where to go.
Okay.
Wade in the water is one of the biggest ones. And it was telling people, if you're going to try to get away, you need to stay in the water.
Oh, really?
So they can't track you. That was the whole purpose.
Smart advice, but I didn't realize that it had been incorporated into the songs. Wow.
Yes, that is where that whole song came from. That was the whole purpose of the song, was offering advice. If you're going to try this, at least try it this way.
So the hidden meanings that were there to help.
Yes, and it became like an anthem. Music is a unifier for all nationalities of people, and it was used for survival. Even today, it's used for just mental health survival.
Oh my goodness, yes.
For everyone. It's also used as a way to connect with others.
Yes, it is.
It is a real big deal.
It is.
It is an important part of our lives.
Yes. And a very important part of the Tulsa history.
Yes.
As well. Because Tulsa was such a melting pot during that time. We had obviously one of the Greenwood area, which was just an amazing place during that time for black black people and everything that was going on there. Then you had, we had the Native Americans. We had that culture that came in and meshed. We also had the Mexican culture that came up. So you were able to take a little bit of all of that, blend it in together with whatever they already have with the music at that time, and to just create this amazing, rich cultural area in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. I think Muskogee was a big jazz.
Yes.
place.
Jazz began in New Orleans.
Oh, really?
There was, I don't know exactly how it all worked, and I don't necessarily care to because I've never looked it up because it's just sad history.
Right.
But for some reason, a large population of enslaved people from West Africa, specifically, ended up in that little delta area.
Oh, yes.
So they brought their own specific West African culture to that area, and it mixed with the French culture that was already in that area. So we ended up with Creole and
Cajun.
Hoodoo and Cajun, and which was influenced by both.
So you had a little
It was a
mixture of
little
both coming
mixture,
together.
yes.
Yeah.
And it was predominantly a black music genre, and it was entertainment for white folk, for the plantation owners and those.
So not only did they have to work in the fields, they had to entertain them as well.
Pretty much.
Okay.
But it wasn't necessarily the black population entertaining the white population. It was the white population taking this that they've learned from the black population and entertaining themselves. Primarily in blackface.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes.
Minstrels.
Yes.
So, as
there's so many things that I want to say here, and I know we are doing our best to be so politically correct,
yes.
But there's that part of you that just wants to go, okay, so let's see. We're going to paint ourselves black and take this music that is known to you, that you guys have created, that is so representative of who you are and your culture and the pain and everything that you have suffered and how you've tried to come together to come through it. So it's not bad enough that we've already done all of this. Let's now take that music, paint our faces black, and perform it. Did I summarize it?
Yeah, that's pretty much how that happened. Yeah, that's it. That's what happened. As years progressed, and primarily in the 1920s, there was still segregation, but a rise in black musicians. This is when American jazz and American blues.
Oh, the blues, yes.
Formed.
Right.
It became an American.
That's when it was really started booming in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and Muskogee at that same time.
In the 20s, yes.
Right.
So it was influenced by the groups in New Orleans.
Okay.
It originated there and it has branched. So by the 20s, when we're here in Oklahoma, there is this already genre of music that exists. But all of this was influenced by African folk music.
Being from Oklahoma, the Greenwood District is an area that is rich in tradition for Oklahoma. If you ever have a chance, come to that area and just to visit the Cultural Center, John Hope Reconciliation, the Reconciliation Park, the Oklahoma Jazz Festival, which goes into all of the rich history that we have in Tulsa and Oklahoma with jazz. But that Greenwood District back in the 1920s, now 1921, was when the massacre happened.
Yes.
But during the 1900s to the 1940s, that area had a rich tradition in, there was like a 36 square block area that encompassed hundreds of businesses and approximately 11,000 people that lived and made that such a vibrant community. And jazz was just everywhere during that time. I mean, it was just you had some of the best jazz in the area, and it was just, I can only, I just like to think about what that area looked like during that time, and see everything that happened with the 400 businesses, the 212 restaurants, there were 10 or 12 jazz clubs, the movie theaters. So, I mean, it was just an amazing time for that area of Tulsa. And then we know that with the 1921, the massacre, which I don't think we're going to cover the massacre in this time, because we're going to stick to the jazz and then come back to what happened with the massacre and how that changed that area forever. But as time went on and we moved into the 1970s, they even began to come back from the massacre, and we still continued to have that area that had that deep tradition of jazz
music.
And we had the Gap Band. If y'all go back to the 70s and 80s, I can go back to the 70s and 80s, and I can remember the Gap Band. They were named for Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, which is that area right there where they grew up, not far from where the massacre happened and where the Greenwood cultural area is. And they were a predominant, more of a funky kind of, but jazz was kind of that base. But they took that and they wanted not only to help bring, help people understand that area, because that part of history was kept out of history books for so long that a lot of people didn't really realize or understand what happened. But the Gap Band was around until, probably, I think they had don't correct me, but I think it was like 2015 or 2020 when they had their last kind of put together hit, maybe 2011. But
I didn't realize.
Well, it was more just redoing stuff and working with other groups. But the band itself was like through the 70s, 80s, early 90s was when it was really, really up. And there, You Dropped a Bomb on Me is one that I will always remember. And believe it or not, there has been some speculation that maybe it has to do with that Greenwood cultural area and the massacre of the 20s. But they say, no, they're glad that it brought recognition to that area.
Right.
But that was basically just having that broken heart and love. I mean, so a very rich history.
Yes. New Orleans also, which I had stated before, had a rich history, and a lot of our more prominent musicians came from this area. Louis Armstrong.
Oh, yes.
Who he didn't start the jazz movement, but he revolutionized it and was one of the very first to come out as a solo jazz artist. He played his trumpet and then he did his own music in it as well.
Oh, really?
And he introduced and popularized the scat singing, which also had its influences from Afro-folk music. But the Jazz Hall of Fame, is it just Oklahoma?
Okay. The Jazz Hall of Fame, the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame is located in the historic Tulsa Union Depot. It's all under renovation now, so you can't go and visit. Otherwise, I would love to go visit there. But the on-site library includes videos and autographed material from, Ella Fitzgerald, from Dizzy Gillespie, J.J. Cole, Duke Ellington, all the greats that at some time or another were in the Tulsa area playing. Maybe not from Tulsa, but at least they played in that area during the time. Muskogee had a rich tradition, and as the Jazz Center down there at the Stern Beach and the Yale Theater. At one time, musical productivity there with per capita was the highest among cities in Oklahoma than in other areas of the world. Just saying.
That's interesting.
At one time.
Yeah. I know it's called the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, but is that like the National Hall of Fame for jazz music? Or?
That I do not know. I don't know if it... I believe that it encompasses jazz from all over. I mean, obviously from all over during that time. But I don't know if it's recognized as the Nation's Hall of Fame for Jazz Music and it's just housed in Oklahoma.
Right.
Or if it's actually...
Because like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Ohio, of all places.
Yes.
So.
Yes. But it definitely is worth a visit. I love it. I mean, because I do believe that the Gap Band, they tried to get their music going here because there was a lot of music that Leon Russell had his place in his studio, and they worked with him for a while, and then they left and went to Los Angeles, which is where things really got going from there.
Yeah. Yeah, especially at that time period between like the 20s and the probably 80s, 90s. Los Angeles is where you went for anything creative like that,
Right.
acting,
Whether it's
music.
acting,
Yeah.
music, anywhere from Will Rogers to to jazz.
Yeah, Will Rogers has a
It's amazing. I mean,
Louis
so
Armstrong
many.
is the father, considered the greatest jazz musician by a lot of people, and got his start in New Orleans, and influenced Ella Fitzgerald, who was the queen of jazz.
Right.
It made its way from this tiny little area in New Orleans to Oklahoma, to New York, to San Diego, to Alabama.
See, I think that's why you have to celebrate diversity.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because diversity brings us so many rich traditions. I mean, and I think that, one of the things that I enjoy most and that I love most is learning about other cultures, and seeing how their past has kind of helped them define their customs and traditions and everything.
And influenced others outside of it.
Yes. And then how that can be.
I mean, how boring would it be if we all looked at
it's time for my science lesson.
Okay.
Okay, so ecosystems, monocultures, which are ecosystems where everything is all the same and you have one crop. Well, if you have some type of bacteria or fungus or anything, parasite that comes in, it's easy to destroy. It's easy to wipe out that whole monoculture, that whole crop, just because everybody's the same. But when you introduce diversity into an ecosystem, the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more stable an ecosystem is. So if only we as a people could learn from an ecosystem and realize that diversity makes all of us more stable, and that we can learn from each other.
And enjoy life.
And enjoy life, because where would we be without jazz? Where would we be without Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong? And I mean, so how could you say to yourself, what a wonderful world, if it weren't for Louis Armstrong?
You couldn't. He wrote the words.
He wrote the words.
Another thing I learned, which doesn't necessarily have specifically to do with what we're talking about, but it is important to music.
Important to note, yes.
The banjo is an African instrument that, I mean, obviously they didn't let them pack their bags and things on the slave trade.
Right. But they can remember that concept.
Yes, there were instruments similar to the banjo, usually 3-stringed. They all had different names, but they originated in Africa. When they were forced here on the slave trade, one of the things they were able to do was recreate those instruments with things they found, leading to the banjo and the guitar.
Oh, that is wonderful.
So
I always wanted to learn to play the guitar. I'm basic, that's
me
it.
too, and I'm left-handed.
You have to flip everything.
I do.
Because you would have to have all the strings reversed, and well, what a great contribution.
I know. Can you think of a song that doesn't have...
No, and think where we'd be if we didn't have the guitar.
Right.
I know. Bands. I mean, the drums, I love the drums. But
yes, Robert Fleming invented what he called it a euphonica, but it was the precursor to modern guitars.
And it had 3 strings, is that what you're saying? Or is that
No, that was the banjo.
The banjo. Oh, the banjo had 3 strings.
Yeah.
So the euphonica had...
The euphonica was supposed to produce a sound that was louder and more resonant than the traditional guitar.
Okay.
So the guitar, the banjo, those things were already out there, but what we think of as a guitar today, like the acoustic and the electric, was his design.
His design that came from that.
Yes, and he called it the euphonica guitar. So
I love that.
But thanks to him taking what he learned from essentially what came from this African banjo type thing.
Right.
All of our music has guitars.
See, I love that.
I can't think of a single song I've ever heard that didn't have a guitar in it somewhere.
Well, if it were a cappella, that's the only thing.
Okay. You win.
That's the only thing I could think of. I was trying to think of anything else. I thought, well,
Can't think of a band that
I
doesn't
can't
have
think
a
of a
guitar
band that
player.
doesn't have a guitar. No.
Any American music, what is considered actual American music, has its roots in Afro-American folk.
That's
all
just
of that
such
came
a-
from there, and the modern guitar came from Robert Fleming, who is a black man who took a good idea and made it better.
And who can play the trumpet better than Louis Armstrong?
Not a single person ever
Except
in the
maybe
history of,
your niece or your
My
daughter.
daughter.
Your daughter.
aside from my daughter Ainsley, who also plays the trumpet.
I'm,
There is nobody on the.
I mean,
No,
just
he's way better than me.
just
Okay.
amazing. Just
I mean, I'm glad you
Wait,
know that and own it.
yes.
I'd be really worried if you thought you were better than Louis Armstrong.
So how did the trumpet? Do we know how the trumpet became involved in jazz?
Marching bands as well,
Oh, really?
that had their wind instruments and their brass instruments, and so the trumpet and other instruments like that became.
So they just took the trumpet from the marching band and
Incorporated.
gave it life.
Gave it life. Yeah.
Gave it life.
It was actually one of the first instruments to ever be recorded. Was a trumpet
Really?
in the 20s.
See, I did not know that either.
Yeah.
That is just such a rich, rich culture. I mean, just bringing together all of that.
Yep.
Things from
Marching
there.
bands.
Marching bands.
Jazz
Who knew?
trumpeters were often part of the marching band, and that was the instrument they played, and they
Took that.
took that.
Gave it. I mean, they really did give it life, and
Like
I mean, because that's just.
Buddy Bolden was the first jazz trumpeter, and it combined ragtime and blues.
Oh my gosh, ragtime.
King Oliver, Cootie Williams, Louis Armstrong, Dizzy Gillespie, all of them
All
were
of the greats.
trumpet
They're
players.
trumpet players.
So, I mean, you incorporate what you know.
That's
and
right. I mean,
that's what they
The
did,
marching
so.
bands during that time. I guess they had a lot of marching bands were a big deal back then, and I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't like what we know now, where you just played a football game. I mean, you marched down the streets. and, I mean, you were.
It was
a,
as important.
yes.
Yeah.
All that together and created one of the most amazing genres of music ever.
Created American music.
Oh,
period.
yeah. Oh, my
Regardless
gosh, yes.
of the genre. Anything that is considered American music has its roots in.
So rock and
This.
roll branches out from jazz.
Rock
Everything.
and roll technically isn't an American music.
It is not.
It originated in Europe.
Oh,
And
yes.
so we
took it.
yes. I mean, just like there are European jazz musicians, jazz is an American thing,
And rock and roll is a European, thing that we came over here. They took our jazz, we took the rock and roll.
Yes,
I love that we can share.
I know.
I know.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Let us know your thoughts. Who is your favorite jazz musician? Ella Fitzgerald,
Ella and Louis. I mean,
Louis Armstrong.
those two are just.
I could listen to Ella Fitzgerald,
Oh, I could too, but then I could listen to
All the
Louis
time.
Armstrong too. So
and
it's just those two are my very most favorite.
my most favorite band ever was the Isley Brothers.
Mine could be the Commodores.
I like the Commodores.
The Isley Brothers are pretty good. Well, I say to myself, what a
What a
wonderful
wonderful
world.
world.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, all of those that contributed to that
That's right.
rich tradition of music.
All right. Thank you all.